Welcome back to Post-Industrial Talk. I'm here with our friend Mark Youngman, coming to us from rural northern Michigan, where Mark is a farmer. Mark has been talking to some of his farmer friends up there about the Trump tariffs and the $12 billion bailout for row crop farmers. Now, row crop farmers are folks who grow corn, soybeans, and the like. Mark, tell us what folks are thinking of these days now that there has been this bailout. From what we understand, 12 billion is not nearly enough to make up for what they've lost. What else are they saying up there?
Good morning. Thank you, Carmen. Right. The 12 billion is not enough. It probably needs to be 3 times that. But having said that, of the 12 billion, 11 billion is going to row crop farmers and primarily soybeans. And we're not really addressing the issue. It's just, once again, we're going to put a Band-Aid over this. And we've done this before and had bailouts for the row crop farmers for exports. But we're not addressing the fundamental underlying issue. So if we're going to spend 12 billion or 40 billion, whatever the number ends up being, where is the discussion on what else we should be doing? Because other farmers are benefiting from this bailout. This is really a very narrow sort of niche bailout. So there are questions out there about we're spending all this money over and over again, and maybe we shouldn't be subsidizing soybeans to sell to China at a loss, which is essentially what we do today. And maybe we should be taking that money and redirecting our agricultural sector into something else. So it's not abandoning those farmers, but taking the money and doing something else with it. Because there's for some farmer, even some soybean farmers, there is probably a niche where they could convert their land to go back to naturally grazed land where you can get grass-fed cattle, because the U.S. does not produce nearly enough grass-fed cattle. And that's primarily because it's very expensive to do so in the U.S. So when you buy grass-fed cattle in the store, you'll often see it's from New Zealand or Argentina or other countries where they are doing grass-fed cattle. And people like the taste is better because grass is what a ruminant naturally eats. They're not supposed to eat soybeans and corn and other grains that we feed them on feedlots. And the reason we do that is because mostly originally because of the fast food industry, they wanted beef that tasted the same across the country and cheap, which means grow it fast. And when you feed cattle grains, you cut 6 months off the time it takes to grow that cow. Whereas grass-fed, you're now doing that for an additional 6 months, which is a lot more expense. So we need to have a discussion on where we end up with all of this, because going to more grass-fed cattle, yes, that beef is going to be more expensive, but is that a terrible thing?
I would say that consumers would think it was a terrible thing, but if they're getting a better quality of meat, so you were saying that in lieu of quantity, we should be focusing on quality?
Right. Or maybe even have tariffs on foreign grass-fed meat so that the American grass-fed meat industry can do better. Again, these are complicated issues. There's not a yes, no. It's not tariffs are good or bad. It's, well, what are you using the tariff for? What are we trying to achieve? Are we trying to, wean ourselves off soybeans? And, I think I would rather see subsidies for grass-fed beef than subsidies for soybeans that we sell to China. Because at least for the grass-fed beef, we'd be subsidizing food for the American consumer, if that's what the American consumer wants, is cheaper beef. So where are these subsidies going, and who is getting the benefit of that? And a lot of people don't think that the Chinese should be benefiting from these subsidies.
Yeah, I see your point on that. The only problem that I could imagine coming from it is that, again, less beef.
Lots of problems.
You're expecting folks to eat fewer hamburgers because what you're proposing is a better tasting hamburger. So instead of having 100 hamburgers a year, which is probably a modest amount for the average American, let's be honest, right, you could have 50 hamburgers a year that'll taste way better. But those 50
right,
will be a little bit more, will be more expensive. But overall, if you're only eating 50 per year, you'll be paying less for them, in total, but you're getting fewer burgers. And they're going to be better for you burgers too.
And they're going to be better for you. And it's better for the land, because naturally grazed beef, you're not plowing the land, you're not planting crops. The cattle are just grazing from area to area each day, and they till the soil, they fertilize the soil, they create habitat for animals, and now you get water can get into the ground and replenish our aquifers. So it helps solve part of our water problem, but it's a lot more labor intensive. And we're coming out with technologies to help that. And so in the future, that it will be not so labor intensive. But in any event, even with technology, it's still going to take longer to grow that beef, which translates into a higher price for the grass-fed beef.
Well, real quick, tell me how you plan on selling this to the American people. If you're the agricultural secretary, how do you sell this to folks? Say, hey, look, there's going to be less beef available, but it's going to be better and it'll be a little more expensive, but trust us, this is the way to go. How do you sell that?
I would say in the interim, it's not going to be more expensive because we're still going to do the feedlot beef, which is the system that we have right now. But what we're going to do is start transitioning some of, for example, like soybean farms to grass-fed beef, so that we have fewer imports of grass-fed beef, because that stuff already is often more expensive. But again, it's a hard sell. And does the soybean farmer want to transition to beef? No, because there's a reason we do mechanically harvested crops, because it's less labor intensive. So, there'd be pushback from the soybean farmers too, and validly. I'm set up for row crops. I don't want to convert back to cattle and have to move them around and whatever. But we should be talking about this, because I've gotten feedback from people when Secretary Rollins is talking about, forcing other countries to buy our beef. Yes, the Secretary of Agriculture is saying that, foreign countries should be buying our good beef. Well, grass-fed beef, I think, is better. And so you're saying you want them to buy our feedlot beef, and that's not a good metric. And cattle farmers know this. They know what that metric is. So, she's not really doing herself a lot of favors. But, a lot of us, we don't really talk that publicly about this, because this is a really, really difficult issue. And at the end of the day, it's our consumers going to be willing to pay for some of the stuff that they also say they want. They want all these things. They want a better environment. They want to get rid of the feedlot, and they also want really, really cheap beef. And those things are in constant conflict. And we need to be talking about where we're going to be as a country on these issues.
Well, that's a tough one, Mark. I appreciate your optimism, but my gut tells me that McDonald's, Burger King, and the like are going to be a hard customer to sell on this idea. Yes. But you're right. I definitely agree with you.
And I think there's an opportunity for Democrats here, because they don't really have an agricultural message at this point. And so you see all this stuff happening, you see this bailout, and instead of just saying, well, he should never have done this and we should have continued to do this, that's kicking the can down the road. Because what Trump has done is he's accelerated an issue that's been brewing for a long time. We're subsidizing exports, and we can't do that forever sustainably. So there's an opportunity for Democrats to come in and say, listen, there's another alternative. If we're going to be spending this money, let's transition to something. Because then at least they have a plan. And people may not like the plan, but at least there's a plan, and it shows that they've thought of it and that they're serious people, rather than just saying we have to go back to the status quo. Because I don't think anybody really thinks that is the answer.
Good point. Mark, as always, I really appreciate you taking the time to explain it to us, particularly us city folk who don't quite understand how where our food comes from and what the farmer does to get it to our tables. Much appreciated, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, Carmen.